Hello and welcome to Lorian Live. I'm so happy to have you here with me today. And I want to introduce a very special guest. Dan Roth is joining us today. And Dan has just an incredible journey. We could spend hours with him here today, but we're going to focus in on a couple of things that I think all of you will find very valuable. And Dan has kind of an eclectic background, but he is most well known right now for his work as a professional speaker. He is in the D&I community and the corporate recruiting. So I really appreciate his focus on empowering those in marginalized communities. He does this in a really unique way that we'll talk about today, and is very devoted to creating resources and communities that are supportive. And I know that you will want to be connected with him after and take advantage of plugging into his communities if you aren't already. And he does that in really both that corporate side. He has had an amazing journey over the past 3 years, and we're going to hone in on that piece of how he has leveraged content creation, community, really putting himself out there and transitioning his life from, you know, a period of time of unemployed dad of twin girls who are darling into really quite the global inspiration. So, Dan, welcome and thank you for joining me on Lorian Live today.
It's great to be back, and for those that aren't familiar, the reason I say back is because, what was it? A couple months ago, I came on as part of a sort of a larger platform, and for those that don't know, that day there was really bad sound, and part of that was I actually broke my computer that day. So it was really bad. But if you see me looking both screens, in addition to being a keynote speaker, I also produce every week. So I right now have the live up on my other monitor so that I can see all the comments and messages and respond. I'm looking here. I got my lights going. There's there's sort of I'm so used. I mean, it's honestly it's one of my blessings of having ADHD. Without, I don't think I could focus as much. But yeah, it's really cool because the more I thought about it, it's getting to be like 4 years now that I've been on this sort of trajectory of my journey, and I really have to sit back and I'm not one to like really think about, hey, how far have I come? But I look back and I kind of have to sit in the moment sometimes because it's hard to process just how where you started to where you are now when you're so focused on going 60 miles and well, I guess for teenagers it's probably 90 miles an hour. As you get older, you're going to learn it goes back down to 65. So
Till you become a twin parent, we have that in common, and then it changes everything.
honestly, having kids didn't change my driving style. Growing up on the East Coast in New Jersey and driving, what was it? What was the storm? I left for California the year before Sandy, and that year there was a terrible, terrible snowstorm that people don't realize about, and I got sort of freaked out. So I was like, so that's when I was like, okay, I don't like driving in the rain anymore. I'm Jewish, so I can't drive at night. So I'm really left to drive during working hours, or I'm kind of out the door.
Uh, well, I would love for you to there's so many parts of your story, and we'll dive into a couple things, but perhaps you can give people just a little snapshot of your journey and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, I think it's first, thank you for the question. And I think it's really important to sort of give a little bit of backstory. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in Jersey. I found out I had ADHD when I was 7 years old, along with language processing disorder, I'm going to call it a condition. I apologize if that's offensive to anybody, but it's a condition where I know what I'm trying to say up here, but it doesn't always come out this way. So, went through a lot of bullying, barely passed through high school, barely got into college, failed out of school, fought to get back in. wound up bringing my GPA up to a 3.0 from a 1.4 in my major, which was journalism. Then really sort of hopped around jobs. I went from journalism to retail to I was in retail when I moved out to California, then telecommunications, healthcare program management. Then that brings us to the last 4 years when um, I can't believe it's 4 years when my kids were born, and then wound up coming into my own as a professional. Oh, okay, I see what you did there. No, it's fine.
Absolutely.
You just kind of caught me off guard as kind of as in the
I
crux of this. So, which is absolutely fine. So let me finish, and then I'll get in, and then I'll talk to you what you're doing. Um, so that's when I kind of switched over, found some gaps, took advantage of those gaps, and wound up leading into recruitment and being at the top of the global market, working for Amazon and becoming a professional speaker, having a 12,000 person group. Uh, I do consultancy work for that I don't talk about a lot. I've been able to give back to nonprofits. It's been kind of crazy, but what she was just doing is we're talking about speaking today, right? So I wanted to give everybody a little bit of behind the scenes look because as a professional speaker, I've really elevated myself within the last couple of years. And if you want to bring that other shot up, so what you're seeing right now is I have my main cam. So I'm actually working with my Mac cam right now that you're seeing in the top screen. In the bottom screen, you're seeing what's behind. Now that is a 4K camera. It's an Elgato, and really, if I want to, I can do whatever I want with this, whether it's adding exposure, white balance. I can, where is it? I could zoom in as much as I want. I don't think anybody wants to see me zoom in. But if you really want to see my boogers, you could go all the way in. So I wanted to give everybody an idea because in addition to that, I'm sitting here with this cat, with this mic, which is my favorite mic. I've got two huge lights over here, my secondary monitor, and this baby is a 180-degree camera that allows you to see my entire studio. So if we're going to talk about this, I wanted to kind of create this immersive experience. Um, and yes, so Gabe, that is what I'm doing right now is through my eCam virtual cam. And we're not going to get into that so specifically, but I do have to note that the streaming provider I use is eCam Live, which I absolutely love, and it's allowed me to do some cool stuff. But that I just have to respond to Gabe because I heckle him all the time. Like if you don't know Gabe, Gabe did a live show every day for like 6 months, and I just heckled the living daylights out of him because like I'm so serious all the time. Gabe's one of my best friends in the world. So I will purposely go in and see what I could do to crack his face a couple times.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I accidentally did that at the timing at the beginning. So, but it was a good transition. And one of the things I appreciate about your journey is you've learned, you've pivoted, you've taken just the responsibility to jump in and teach yourself and learn and connect with others. And you've described a lot of your journey, and you have a great newsletter where you dive into some various topics. And one of the things that I appreciated is you kind of broke down your stats last year and talked about this journey that you went on now getting into your fourth year of that, getting started and that kind of that awkward journey when you're learning and doing, and there's a lot that's out there in the community. And for those of us who didn't grow up in, from time of little kids of social media, of just being out there all the time, it takes some bravery to do that. You talk about your second year of kind of torching things, right? And then the third year of getting rebranded, focusing your content and sharpening your message. And what you've created during that season is quite amazing with over 40,000 followers, over 12,000 connections, 13,000 subscribers, your private group over 11,000, and last year's view count just under 6 million. It's just astounding. And so much of that is just jumping in and doing the process. So did
Yeah.
you did you have those thoughts along the way? Maybe you could take us a little bit through
Yeah.
your journey.
So let me start off by saying that one of the things I'm most proud about is that uh, I've reached that many people without having any one individual viral post. I've never had something go over a million. I've never tried to get something over a million. Believe it or not, the posts that have done the best for me were the ones I felt least comfortable actually putting out. Uh, so those that have followed me are going to know part of this, and those that are new, this is going to be their first time hearing it. Um, the backbone of everything that I do is my children. Uh, Before they were born, because I don't want anybody to think this was easy, because it's far from easy. Before they were born, if I hit a roadblock, I was the first one to run from it. A lot of mistakes I made leading up, and if I had something go wrong, I would sit in depression. It's the reality of how I operated. I threw myself pity parties. When my children were born, and I'm not going to get into the full story, I almost lost my wife during delivery. I realized that if I didn't do everything in my capability to make the world a better place for them, that I wasn't doing my duty as a father, as a global citizen. And as much as I don't like to say that one moment changed my life, because it's definitely some of its parts, that moment absolutely changed my life, because what I found, and this even surprised me, was that even when I had setbacks after that, I I couldn't be set back for long. Like, I almost would like try to be depressed about it, but I knew that I had this calling, and sort of like, you try to go backwards, and so you take a couple steps forward, and then you try to take backwards, and then all of a sudden there's a wall behind you. So I couldn't go back, and that really created the sense of, okay, well, I hit a block. What do I have to do now? So a lot of these things were about, first of all, accepting what I need to do. Second was accepting who I am. The moment I started talking about the fact I'm ADHD, the fact I'm talking about that I got bullied, how I talk about mental health and my struggles, those are the moments that really set me up to succeed, because there was at that point, there was nothing left to lose, because here I am, love me, hate me, feel indifferent to me. This is it. And I started utilizing that to my advantage. I see so many posts out there, and my disdain for social Saturdays is sort of, it is well known. But I'm seeing a lot of the stuff that's being done right now in the current state of LinkedIn. And I'm like, I did that 3 years ago. And the reason I'm not doing it anymore is because I had the foresight to say, okay, well, this is what I'm doing now. At a certain point, you reach a plateau, and you should know before you get to that plateau where that next path is, so that you could go there. So when I was doing my weekly post that put job seekers in front of 5.6 million people in 2 years, before the end of it, I created the group. Now the group has 12,000 people. So, but then I stopped doing the post, because the post, first of all, it took 6 to 8 hours of my time for free, which I didn't have anymore, that I could focus on other things. But second is, I saw that sort of coming to a redundancy. Other people were starting to do it. I don't want to be in a space where everybody else is. I want to be creating my own lane. When social audio came up, I recognized that you had to be able to transfer people from one platform to another. So I went on Clubhouse. I went into the recruitment rooms. This is how I wound up getting a job at Amazon. I got to meet people. I built my stature. I brought them over to LinkedIn as my primary medium, but then I realized that there was a plateau in how many people you could be around and how far you could get in that area. So then I started focus on keynote speaking and talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. And then once I ran out in that space, I said, okay, I'm not going to be there anymore because I'm not going to be sucked in for the sake of being sucked in. It doesn't make any sense to me. There has to be a target and a goal. And but what was beneficial is during that time, in addition to gaining knowledge and giving knowledge, I was practicing. During the last 3 years, I did roughly 250 podcasts, live events, so on and so forth. And I didn't charge. And the reason I didn't charge, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, is because I knew that I wanted to sharpen my voice. I wanted to get to know myself better from a content basis, test out different things, so that when I did embark on my professional speaking career, I instead of charging $1,000 per event, now I could charge 7,500, 1,200, 10 to 15,000 is the current market average for corporations. So I wasn't starting off low. I was perfecting myself to the point I got to it. And guess what? The first in-person event I did, career thought leaders, standing ovation. I was nervous as hell. I was so nervous. I had people pulling me aside. Why are you so nervous? And then I got up there and I realized I love this. And it was such a monumental occasion. And just to kind of go back to something, I wasn't nervous because I didn't believe in what I could do. I was nervous at the pressure of fulfilling expectations because here's the truth. I am a very reserved person, which nobody listening is going to believe. Uh, Humor, talking have always been defense mechanisms for me. So people online see this sort of loud, very opinionated person, and then they get to meet me, and I have social anxiety. I get very closed in. Ask Claire Davis. Claire Davis, one of my best friends in the world, she flew down from Washington State for the Career Thought Leaders Conference, and I stuck to her like glue because that was my comfort zone. Um, and eventually, I got to know different people, and I started being more comfortable with my own skin. But it, it was a hard process, and that's where like we talk about introverts, extroverts. I'm an ambivert. When I feel safe with you, I can be more reserved and relaxed and quiet, but then there's this outward expression. And a lot of that's because it's what I have to do. So, I know I gave you a lot, but that's what you get with me.
No, I think that's it's such good insight, and I think many people don't realize. I relate to what you were saying, that LinkedIn and podcasts and speaking and building community this way is actually a great medium for people who are more introverted, because you are often in a controlled environment by yourself, and so you really can energize and then focus in and do your thing in the moment and then go back. So it's actually been a surprise to me that it's such a good fit, but it does take practice. And I think that idea of, you did your posts for 80 straight weeks. You've done over 200 podcasts and sessions. And one really, I think, exciting part of LinkedIn and community and all of these elements is that you can do that you can take action, you can choose to post or create newsletters.
I want to say yes, but I also want to say no. From a physical perspective, yes, you can. But, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but again, this is me. I don't always think, while you can, I don't always think that people feel empowered to do it. When I look at what I did it understanding that people may look at me differently, that I may lose jobs. I did it because I am more comfortable. Like a lot of people find out about their neurodiversity later in life. I got very lucky, and I do consider myself lucky to find out early on. So I'm very comfortable in my own skin. Well, let me reframe. I have horrible body dysmorphia, but I'm comfortable in my own personality, is what I should say. Um, and that has allowed me to do this. But if we look at it, a lot of the posts that don't do well. So recently I did a poll about what kind of posts people are seeing, and only 6% said social justice causes. That's a huge issue for me. And it was out of 500 people. So what that means to me is that a lot of people are hopping on trends where they can produce content because they know that it's gonna be valued if you're here, here, or here. But the second that you go out of this box, then it gets reduced. And actually, funny enough, I'm having a talk with one of the LinkedIn product managers about this tomorrow because I was part of a beta program and I specifically left the group. I said, look, I'm not here for a top voice badge. I'm here because I'm looking to actually make a difference. Now, I want to touch on one thing that you said. The truth of the matter is, I could be at 100,000 followers if I wanted to be. I'm right now at 13,000 connections and I've turned away 45,000. And the reason I did that was not to be a dick, pardon my French. Sorry, Danny. Um, but because the one thing that I believe a lot of people miss within this, in their quest to be liked and quest for affirmation, is the intentionality. If I can't serve, it's not, and by the way, it's not always about can you serve me. A lot of it has to do with can I serve you. A lot of the groups that I didn't necessarily connect with were, when I was doing the recruitment work, were those that were in high school and college because I didn't feel like I could add any value to them. So I'm not going to necessarily connect with them. They're going to, if they want to get something from my post, if they want to get something from my group, that's completely fine. There are people there that will be able to help them. But I don't want to create a false image of, hey, I know everything about I know everything about everything. I don't want to do that. So I stopped doing that. Now, when I stopped my post, I was gaining 1,000 to 1,500 followers per week. I stopped that back in October. We're now in May. Realistically, if I take that 1,000 followers and let's just make the assumption that it's 20 weeks, even though I know it's 25 weeks. Now you're looking at, instead of somebody with 44,000 followers, now you're looking at somebody with roughly 65, 70, not including the additional 17,000 connections if I wanted to square that away. If I did that, would I have more reach? Potentially. Would I be looking at things differently? Would I be a top voice? Possibly. I don't give a shit. That wasn't my objective. Now, I want to preface that with saying I've gotten awards. JobScan awarded me top 25 job search experts to follow, but I don't go out for them. But yeah, do they hurt if you're not named on a list? Sure. But then here's the other side of the coin. Today, two lists came out. I forget the name of the person that did one of them. I think it was like the top 200 voices on LinkedIn, and then the other was Bob McIntosh. I was named on Bob's list, but the other one, when you look at the top 10 names, it was primarily white men. There was one female representation, who I believe was either number 6 or number 7, Linda Lee, and then the rest were white men. Now, I don't care if it wasn't done on purpose. That's not representative of what I stand for. So keep me off that damn list, because I want to be part of actual representation,
Yeah,
not phony representation.
yeah, absolutely. I honestly, it shocks me every time that happens today, because just for your own, you know, for your own selfish reasons, don't put out a list like that. I mean, of course, wanting to be, I really appreciate you. You talk about it's not advocate,
Accomplice.
ally versus, yes, a conflict. Can you share more about that? I think that's such an important differentiation, and something to be able to
Yeah.
really think about, and on when you talk about, getting outside of the bounds of what's popular on content, this is a space that's it's almost crickets, and I find at times you'll see a post, or I've had that experience in the past, and it's such a difference between what people will communicate on or know what to say. But I really liked your message. So can you share a little bit about your thoughts around that difference between ally and accomplice?
Sure, and you may hear my children in the background as they just got home. Hopefully, my dogs be quiet. I have a Jack Russell. They don't really shut up. Um, so, my main keynote, which is called Inclusion, Revolution, A Path to Progress, really is focused on this idea of whether of bringing passive allies to active accomplices. And here's the reason: I don't want anybody to feel like I'm saying that ally is a bad word. I'm not. I just think it's a very reserved word that we need to get out of because there's too many allies, not nearly enough action takers. An ally, by basic definition, is someone that believes in a cause and will stand by a specific group. So look at it as uh, you go to your friend with an issue that you're facing at work and they just listen to you and they support you. That's an ally. What an accomplice is somebody that sees that the issues that are being dealt with are rooted in the structure, in the oppressive structure of society, and they go about to make actual change. So, using that same example, somebody comes to you and has a problem with work. Let's make the assumption they're a Black female. This is one of the examples I give in my keynote. You then, what an accomplice would do is say, okay, I'm going to support you. Let me take a look and deep dive into what the root cause of that issue is. And regardless of whether or not they're putting themselves at risk, because accomplices very often will put themselves at risk, they try to get to the bottom and work to resolve those issues. Now, it's almost impossible right now to resolve issues for a lot of reasons, including the fact, and I'm included in this number, of the amount of DEI uh, practitioners that have been let go from corporate. But it's also difficult because one of the most intelligent things that corporate ever did was create an environment where people want to make a change, but it's blocked at certain levels, or they become so comfortable within what they're doing that they don't want to push too hard. A lot of the people within DEI that are accomplices, what they'll do is they'll wind up in environments where they go in really happy, working to make change, and then they get met by middle management blocking doors. My job is to break down those doors. I don't like doors. Well, I do in the bathroom, but outside of that, I
How can you give some example, or maybe an example or two that you share in your talks around what would that look like of somebody being an accomplice, and how could they go about breaking down a door and being willing to take that stand and be actively involved?
so there's a lot of ways that people could be actively involved. I think the first step, and by the way, nobody has any right to tell you whether you should be an ally or an accomplice. That's not my objective. Even though I want to bridge the gap, this is all about creating awareness, and then with awareness, giving practical steps. So, for example, if you want to be an accomplice, and let's just say that you're a male and you're in a board meeting with a bunch of women and a bunch of men, and one of the women is speaking. The male butts in, starts gaslighting her. An accomplice will step in, stop that behavior, and then take it to the next level. Now they don't have to. The reason is this is the risk, right? The risk is you may be seen as you switching sides, be a Benedict Arnold, so to speak, but you may alienate yourself from moving up, but you're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Another example would be an accomplice will oftentimes give up their seat. So I'm in a place of privilege. Let me elevate others. A lot of my close friends will say, all we want is to be placed in positions of opportunity. And you shouldn't be doing it because you're saying, hey, I want to be an accomplice. Let me put these people in positions of opportunity, because that's a false narrative. It should be the humanization of who we are and saying, hey, this is the best person for this regardless. There's a ton more examples I give, and I got to be honest, I'm trying to get gigs, so I'm not necessarily going to go into the exact examples that I use.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so many different ways to be an accomplice, but it all starts with researching, having a better understanding of history, and why the systems were created the way that they are, how it all comes down to human centered. Uh, it all comes down to choices that we make as individuals. And then once you have that knowledge base, then you may be able to go ask somebody, but you really want to start from that place of knowledge and then make that determination. Well, now what? Uh, when I first started, I did not do this right. A lot of allies have a tendency to do what they assume is correct instead of sitting back and listening first, hearing themselves, sitting with themselves, and then, and only then, once they have that understanding, speaking out. Like, I've seen a lot of situations where people will go in, I'm an ally, I'm an ally, I'm colorblind, I'm colorblind. You should not be using colorblind in a conversation about race. There is not a damn person asking you to be colorblind. I see every single person for who they are and what they are. And we are a community. Race is a social construct. This is what it's about. Um, and the biggest issue is that a lot of these allies that do this then get very defensive about when somebody says to them, hey, you need to check yourself. No. Sit with yourself, listen to what's going on, learn. And that's the hard part. It's the decolonization of whiteness.
You have some great resources if anyone wants a little more detail in your newsletter just at the turn of the year, you list some really powerful resources. So I will post that in the chat after if anyone wants to come back or definitely just dive into Dan's newsletter there from January. And
My
one of the
news my newsletter is such a mixed bag. Like, I went to rewrite the description the other day, and I'm sitting there looking at, like, can I say what this thing is about? The only thing I could accurately say is that I give my honest opinion on a lot of random stuff. Like, but I don't force feed. That's my thing. I've never
Mhm.
written a newsletter that I've force fed. It's all been, I've been motivated and captivated to write, so I've written. Um, but I'll tell you, some of my best work has done the worst. I wrote an entire post one time about body dysmorphia, something I suffer from. And being a male, it very rarely gets spoken about. I have dealt with male postpartum depression. Very rarely gets spoken about. Some of my proudest stuff that barely cracked the LinkedIn algorithm. So you never know.
You never know. Well, and pivoting your messages around and just your own personal behavior around authenticity, being real, sharing what's true, it's translating that into a speech or a keynote or a message in that kind of corporate conference environment. That's a big pivot. What have you found to be effective to really craft a compelling message that engages your audience and really moves the dial with some of these topics, which are a little difficult sometimes?
So what's interesting about you saying that is that it's hard to gauge a lot of times because we're just getting back to in person. And so when somebody's virtual, it's basically impossible. Like, even if we're on Zoom, I mean, you can only see what, six boxes. So gauging reactions is almost impossible. In person is a lot different. In person, you could sort of tell it. And the reality of the situation is that one of my deepest sources of sadness is that I put on 30 some odd large scale diversity events that I had planned for months, marketed, and I think I had like a 4% rate of people that showed up that were white. So first, the part of it is that you need to speak to the right audience, but if the right audience isn't willing to speak, isn't willing to listen, then it's hard. And that's actually the reason I've done a reduction in the events that I've pulled, because I'm not going to produce trauma porn. I'm just it wouldn't be right. It's not in me to produce trauma porn. But to answer your question, the way that I do things, and this, I feel like I need to mention my mentor, Jen Buck, who, if anybody doesn't know who she is, she's one of the most giving and caring people you'll ever meet. But she's a professional speaker with 24 years of experience who works for a nonprofit. Uh, and she gave me what I really needed, which was the validation to be okay doing what I do best, which is storytelling. I didn't feel like I could do that. And she kind of sat me down. She's like, yeah, that's what I do. That's what you do best. Like, why wouldn't you? So my keynotes, and the reason that I get through to people, is because I tell three extremely personal stories. One of the stories that I talk about is how I almost lost my wife during childbirth. And I go into detail about it. And I share how her company really was an exclusive environment and didn't do anything to support. I talk about my struggles growing up with ADHD and how through bullying and anxiety, I was basically forced to work from home 7 years ago. I made the choice. This was well before. I go into a story about how one of my coworkers contacted me crying because she was being gaslit by training materials, and how it created this sense of it was like in the place that she was supposed to be able to belong, they were making her stand out on an island with everybody watching. So, in telling these stories, my objective is to both make people feel uncomfortable, but also do it in a way that lets them find their own emotional connection to it. And in finding that emotional connection, there may be 100 people in a room and 100 people get something different. That's absolutely fine. I love that. But that's how I bring in the connection. And then once I start talking about the accomplice, once I start talking about the ally, it sort of goes emotion, smack you in the face. Not a hard smack. I don't condone that. But so it's really, I try to be as well rounded as I can with it. And that's how my other keynotes are. One of my keynotes talks about growing up with ADHD, and almost similar to the story that I'm telling now. And it all goes based on emotion, because this is what I know how to do. Being my journey as a white anti-racist. First of all, I shouldn't have to call myself an anti-racist. It's just what I am. But the point is to share what my journey was, and not to gaslight it and say, "Hey, I was perfect the entire time," but to bring people through the reality. This is why I talk about the fact that I struggle with anxiety and depression every single day. I've been hardly depressed the last 6 months, especially since I lost my job. But by talking about it, that's part of the connection that we make. And at the end of the day, if you can make that connection, then you really have an opportunity to change lives. And I'm here to change lives. By the way, hi, Danny. I had to shout him out, because if anybody's going to give me a job right now, it's him. Um, but he's probably on 16 meetings in 4 hours on 3 days, on no sleep for 3 days. So, but Danny Cohen, Mishpuka, knock, knock, knock. Um,
Uh, yes. Well, I so one of the things that you did in one of your newsletters that I thought was really interesting is you kind of broke down the approach. And for those, a lot of people are trying to imagine, how do I actually, you know, get build this network? How do I move my career forward? There's a couple things that I noticed about your journey is that you've built some great relationships, and just seeing some of your interviews and reading some of your materials, you have people that are just obviously really good connections, and it seems like many of those folks, you've built those connections within this LinkedIn community. So I know a lot of people really struggle with how to build genuine connections in a world where there's interest, but everybody's really busy. So could you maybe tell a little bit about your journey of one, how you built your network, and the closer ties, of course, and you're great about tagging people and really honoring where you get information, and bringing forward great pieces of content of other people, but and then perhaps maybe how people have approached you and established and built a connection.
So I have to give my father a lot of credit for this. Uh, and I'll get into, and so before I get into, just to give you an idea why my father was a 30-year manager at a financial institution, and he's really the one that taught me about valuing your employees, your connections, your friends. So, first and foremost, all grace and appreciation goes towards my father. Uh, the way that I was able to do this was both strategic and completely organic, which may sound a little bit weird. Strategically, at every step of the way, every place, every time I knew I was making a move, I aimed to connect with people that I could again provide value, that could provide value to me. So as I was working to get into recruitment and job seeking, I connected with recruiters. I connected with coaches. I connected with resume writers. I connected with other job seekers when I noticed that I had a bunch of job seekers in my network that were in a similar geographic area. I put them in groups because while I may know of X, um, a lot of times people in similar areas will have even more insight into what they do. And I started building these micro communities. And then when I wanted to get into keynote speaking, I started really investing my time and working with different people within those communities. But I think the biggest thing for me that allowed me to build connections was the fact that when I prop people up, it's done because I want to. Like, I don't think twice about it. I don't tag people because I think it's the cool thing to do or because the algorithm's going to appreciate it. I tag people and show appreciation because I don't think that we live in a society where people actively show their appreciation for people. They very well may. They may even think that the other person feels valued. But until you actually say to them, I value you, I appreciate you, they have no idea. And that's something I've understood for a very long time. So when I prop people up and give them credit, it's because I see something in them. I value them. They've given something to me, whether they realize it or not. And it's through that value that I really built close friendships. I mean, I mentioned Claire Davis before. I mentioned Jen Buck, obviously Future Kane, who I do a ton of work with, Tegan Bartos. These are all people that have gone to bat for me and I've gone to bat for them. People don't know, as I was going through Job Connection Tuesdays, people don't know how often I was referring business, how I took stock of who I could really trust and sent over. They don't know about how many people reached out to me, hey, could you help me out? And I could have said no, but I didn't. Because how long does it take to answer a question? Look, I have my away message on LinkedIn because I was getting 1,000 messages per day. But even in my peak, I was responding or trying to respond to every single person. And it's in that value that I think they gained a deep respect. And also in building my network, if I could say if I could say that I'm good at one thing, I don't think anybody would ever say that I'm every single thing I put out is who I am, what I am. It may have dirt across, it may come across as crass. I know I could be a jerk, but there's nothing fake, fraudulent about it. And people understand that and they respect that. And it's just about communication and caring. But we often say sometimes the most obvious things are the most overlooked. Well, they're not overlooked to me.
That genuineness and the things that happen behind the scenes is so often what builds that trust with people, and that I think that undercurrent of the reputation of somebody who's really doing meaningful work in addition to being a content creator, so to speak. It's been one of the topics that it's we can't like all day long. Chat GPT, all the artificial intelligence, and you made a comment in one of your articles about, I think you and I were like the last people holding the Blackberries. I had my
I love the
every
BlackBerry.
I love my Blackberry. I finally gave it up when I tried to. I got my last one and it was ported. I couldn't even download my bank's app, so I finally had to give in. But this whole artificial intelligence has been such a and it obviously it's been around for a long time, but what's happening today is such a change, and I appreciated some of that. I'm actually a huge fan from a efficiency for a lot of work that I'm doing, but I thought it was interesting dialogue that you had around content creation. If you're using it to create content, then you're not bringing your authenticity, your voice, your creativity. And there's such a that's such an interesting topic right now, and moving into work and the future. What did what are your thoughts around that? I it was such a can of worms, but
You
it's
you really did. So here's the thing. Back in the day, I would have just said I hate AI, and left it at that. I've actually done extensive research. I mean, I was part of the beta. I am part of the beta program for collaborative articles with LinkedIn. I was one of the first to access Bard. I have not used Chat GPT. Um, there's two rounds of this. One is let me start off by saying there's one particular AI tool called Yoodli, Yoodli, that I really respect and appreciate. And I have to thank Marie Zimenoff for having them at the Career Thought Leaders Conference because I got to see how it worked. And what that particular application does is if you want to do a talk, then it records you and then it will count how many times you've used filler words and different stuff so that you could practice and get better. And I really find the value in that because even when you talk in person, sometimes the nerves get the best of you and you just want to have that do it yourself beforehand, sort of sing in the shower mentality, and then kind of bridge the gap. And I have no issue with that. Um, from an other perspective, I'm really old school. I have never used a Kindle. Don't ever want to use a Kindle. Like I come from a journalism background. I've been creating content since I was a kid, and I look at how many kids get lost in video games. And I mean, when I was a kid back in Jersey, my mom and dad would stick me outside after a snowstorm, give me a big cardboard box, and with that we had fun with it. Like we used our creativity. And look, I understand a lot of people will say, well, it just helps me get started. Does it? Every single person has it within themselves to curate and create what they want to create. And I'm not going to hold it against them. I just don't want people to lose their voice. I don't want people to lose their sense of imagination when it comes to creation. I mean, I even hated digital cameras for a long time, which is another story entirely. I have one now. To me, it's just the creative arts to me is home. And AI very much feels like uh, a step parent that I don't like.
Fair
I
enough.
think that's the best way that I could possibly express it. Now, here's where I'm going to be a little bit hypocritical. I don't have any issues with people using AI for things that I don't think are worth a damn, like cover letters. I think are a complete waste of time, and I hate them. I vehemently hate them. They're the To me, they're the equivalent of writing a dating profile. How many different ways can I write something to stand out? I don't know. It so but yeah, it create the creative arts is just home. And I'd rather teach somebody how to get out of that writer's block than them sit with an AI and say, okay, well, I'm going to have an AI generate three-fourths of the story. I'm going to put in the last 25%, except for Gabe Liao. If Gabe wants to use AI, then anything's better than what he produces. But that's me heckling him a little bit.
I think it'd be funny to go back through history and pull out the two of you, your dialogue and comments back and forth.
No, no, I would get in so much trouble. Like, so, truth be told, um, I come from having a very dirty, dark sense of humor. I grew up on people like Dice Clay and Married with Children. And the funny thing has been, because I talk about things that are so serious, I've had people actually say to me, you're the dad with twins talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. You can't do that. And I'm sitting there. Can I show something? Like, I have my button right here. And like, this is my sense of humor. Um, so my point being is that I tend to be serious all day long, except with my kids. And then, but then when Gabe was doing his show, I knew it was a safe environment because he's like a brother to me. So I would go in and just completely rip him to shreds. But it was done in a playful way, and he knew it. He throws it right back at me. So I think I've going through Gabe's post is kind of like going through your Gmail. There's like 10,000 things you just wind up delete, 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 delete.
Well, somebody that has worked for, one of the global powerhouses, Amazon, and been a recruiter, so many of the folks that participate with Lorian Live, and they are in the space of looking for opportunities. And your message around authenticity and being yourself. And I know you're anti cover letter, but you do talk about optimizing your LinkedIn profile to be that balance of that personality. How would you, I guess, what advice would you have for people that are looking for opportunities? How can they do that balance between being the person who's can be hired and is going to make those, lists of being interviewed and make the short list and get an offer, with sort of sharing about themselves personally and being authentic, and kind of how have you, as a recruiter and being part of a team, like what are the things that you see that work well and really allow people to find the spot that's good for them, it's a good fit.
The truth is that there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and I'm not going to get into this, but you know that I'm in a similar spot. Um, and the reason that there's uncertainty is because I look at back in the pandemic when people were losing their jobs, and we're talking about teachers and all these others that were really uh, shifting gears. Now, all of a sudden, it's the folks in DEI and recruitment that are in that same boat. So 3.5, 4 years ago, there was this dynamic shift for from applying to a lot of jobs to utilizing your network and going from there. And now we're at a certain point where I don't think there's any one perfect solution. In fact, I know there's no one perfect solution. A lot of it, and I feel bad saying this, a lot of this of it comes down to work. I think the best thing that we could do is sort of leave no stone unturned. Like you don't want to leave anything where you could say, okay, well that was an easy up for them. Now, how to do that? First, let me touch on the cover letter piece. The reason I don't like cover letters, I think they're completely inauthentic. And I think when you're asking a candidate to write 100 cover letters to 100 different companies, how often can they actually write something concise and different enough that makes them feel like they're presenting an accurate representation of themselves? Because when they don't get callbacks, they don't get responses, then they think, okay, well that must have been a bad cover letter. It might have been a great cover letter, but how do you know? And the second part of that is I don't know how many recruiters actually look at them. Maybe agency. I mean, I've only worked in corporate recruiting. Maybe agency looks at the cover letters. I've never looked at one in my life. So that's part of the issue. The other thing is there's um there's a risk. In my personal opinion, when people are able and feel empowered to be open about who they are, it's going to give them the best opportunity. That means if they need accommodations to look up on that company's website, if they have accommodation programs, which are never part of HR, it's a point not to be. So, like if you need an accommodation with doing an interview on the phone versus on video, then you'll have accommodations, and it leads all the way through the interviews. But there's a lot of apprehension in utilizing those services because of both conscious and unconscious bias. Although, yeah, I'm not gonna. I know somebody that would say to me, Dan, it's all conscious bias, but that's a different story. Um, as far as LinkedIn goes, I help people with LinkedIn because they ask me to. I don't like it talking about it because it's not like anything that is redundant is not ADHD friendly. But the best thing I could say is that showing yourself in the best way possible. The about section in particular, I think, really needs to be a story about who you are and where you've gone. I think scalability would be a really key word within the about section, especially if you're changing careers. A lot of times people have challenges when they are shifting careers. uh, they may go from a small company, and the big issue may be them showing how they could take that experience and scale it to a massive multi-billion dollar company. So if you could show how what you've done will scale to where you're going, that immediately is giving a recruiter an idea of how you think about things and your overall opinion. um, and then the other thing I would say is, and this is again personal opinion, don't focus on culture fit. I If we're going to succeed as a society, if we're going to progress, we need to stop worrying about culture fit and really start looking at culture add. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, culture fit is when a company looks for somebody that will fit in exactly with what they already have. Culture add is when you bring in something completely organic and different. I'm a big believer that adults need to be adults and act as adults. And that means being able to have hard conversations without, with, you could feel hurt, but be open to have that conversation so that you come back out on the better end. So all that together is really important. I mean, and also the last thing I'm going to say about the LinkedIn profile, uh, if you don't take your time in curating it, that sets a really bad example because then in my mind as a recruiter, I'm thinking, well, if they're not going to take their time to do the research and figure out the right way to do this, if they're not going to spell check, How do I know that they're going to be okay in a corporate setting? How do I know they're going to be okay in my office? And God, there's so many resources out there for that. I mean, I have a resource that I've given out for free. So do what you've got to do. Um, Check out the resources out there. And the one last thing I would say is be very, very mindful and careful who you reach out to for help. There are a lot of fake influencers, a lot of fake experts, and that sounds like I'm being negative. It's just the God's honest truth. And a lot of people that are taking money that have no right doing it. Um, if you want help, reach out to me, and I'll point you in the right direction. Join my group. I purposely don't allow anybody to share their services unless I've vetted them individually, and I have turned people down. I had one company come to me that was a resume writing company. I asked if any of the resume writers were certified. They said no. I said, you can't post on my site because I need to make sure that individuals are if they're going to spend money, that they're going to get that value for it. Because I've been ripped off before. Um, I was ripped off on Fiverr. Um, and I won't let that happen to other people because I understand desperation. And when we're desperate, we look for ways out.
Yeah.
Uh, I want those people, even especially when they're in their worst moments, to feel that we, the collective we, has their back.
Absolutely. Well, and let's make sure that people know how to connect with you, how to join your group. Those of you who have opportunities for speaking, looking for that, or certainly within your organizations. Um, Dan is an experienced and great speaker, so certainly consider that. But Dan, why don't you tell people how they can reach you, the best ways to connect and get involved and be part of what you have going on in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to reach me is honestly two ways. On LinkedIn, uh, I won't. You could send me a message if you want to send me a connection request. I can't promise you I'll accept, but make sure that you send a message with it so that I know. If you want to be part of my community, you could certainly reach out to me. Um, the co-owner of that community, her name's Tegan Bartos. She's about to have a baby, but she's the other person, and she's tremendous. Uh, every Wednesday, I produce a show on LinkedIn called Healing Our Future with my mentor and dear friend, Future Kane, in which we talk about just individual healing path. It's really sort of meant to help you feel better. Ask at danrothconsulting.com is the primary way to reach me for speaking engagements. And uh, if you need a referral for somebody that, if you're looking for somebody to hire and you need a referral and you want a high quality individual, let me know. I have so many people in my network that are really looking for work. And the last thing I would say is if, well, also reach out to Danny's organization. They're a staffing agency. They can help you find work. Hi,
Absolutely.
Danny. Um, but yeah, if you need a recommendation on somebody that you could go to that won't rip you off, let me know. And actually, the last thing I want to say is this: if you're listening to this and you are a job seeker, please empower yourself to do research on how much your value is within the open market. There's websites like salary.com and levels.fyi that will share with you what your role is in your region. And then you could go from there and identifying which end of the spectrum that you're on. But don't leave money on the door because you haven't done your research and let companies take advantage of you.
Powerful advice, absolutely. And Dan, thank you so much for joining me today on Lorian Live. So love the conversation, really inspired by the work that you're doing and look forward to being a part of it myself and really being I joined the community last week when I found out more about it and I really look forward to participating. So thank you for spending the time with us and thank you to all of you who joined today and for those of you that are watching the recording, feel free to comment and we can share some resources as well, and I'll follow up and post Dan's information and the group and such. So
It's
thank
an
you
honor,
all.
it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you for having me back. You are tremendous. I know for those that don't know, I know you have some personal stuff going on. So the fact that you even made time today, I just want to share my gratitude.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, and we'll see you here next Thursday at 3:30